I smiled when my daughter-in-law told me to leave. It wasn't the smile of happiness, you understand. Not the kind that reaches your eyes. It was a different kind of smile altogether. The kind that forms when your heart is breaking so quietly, so completely, that your face doesn't know what else to do. It was the smile you wear when you finally see the truth, clear and sharp as winter air, after a long season of fog. They were all there, in my son's beautiful, sprawling living room. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, a celebration of my husband's Lifetime Achievement Award. 40 years of work, of sacrifice, of quiet dedication, crowned with this moment. The air smelled of expensive perfume, rich food, and success. And in the middle of it all, I felt invisible, a ghost in my own life's party. And then Sarah, my daughter-in-law, with her perfect dress and her polite, icy voice, leaned in. She didn't want to cause a scene, she said. But perhaps I might be more comfortable upstairs. I was looking a little tired, she said. My simple dress was a bit out of place. She meant well, of course. She always means well. That's what makes it so hard. So I smiled. I nodded. And I turned away from the party, from my husband surrounded by admirers, from my son, who didn't see me leave. I walked slowly up the wide, curving staircase, each step a little heavier than the last. And as the noise of the party faded into a distant hum below me, I realized this wasn't about a dress or a party. This was the end of something. The final, gentle nudge out of a story I thought I was still helping to write, and my name is Eleanor. I'm 67 years old. For 45 of those years, I have been Robert's wife. For 38 of them, I have been David's mother. Those two titles were my whole world. They were my sunrise and my sunset. If you had asked me who I was at any point, that's what I would have said. Robert's wife. David's mom. I met Robert when I was 22. He was all sharp angles and big dreams, a young engineer with ink on his fingers and a slide rule in his pocket. We didn't have much. We lived in a tiny apartment that smelled of old carpet and hopefulness. I worked as a secretary to help pay the bills while he finished his degree. I'd type letters all day, my fingers aching, and come home to make a meal out of whatever was on sale. Potatoes and a little sausage. Soup that lasted for days. But those evenings were golden. We'd sit at our wobbly kitchen table, the one we found at a thrift store. He'd tell me about his classes, about bridges and stresses and forces. I didn't always understand the details, but I understood the light in his eyes. I'd tell him about the office, the funny things my boss would say. We'd dream together. A house one day, maybe a child, a life that felt solid and safe. When David came, our world both exploded and came into focus. He was this tiny, perfect thing that made every sacrifice feel like a privilege. I stopped working then. Robert said my job was there at home building our family, and I believed him. I loved it. I filled my days with lullabies and laundry, with scraped knees and carefully packed lunches. I was the architect of our small, warm universe. Robert was out there, building a different kind of structure, his career. The years moved like pages in a familiar book. Robert worked longer hours. He traveled sometimes. There were promotions, a bigger house, a better car. My world, meanwhile, stayed the same size. The walls of our home, the route to David's school, the aisles of the grocery store. But it felt full. It felt important. I made sure Robert's suits were pressed for his important meetings. I made sure David had his science project poster board the night before it was due. I was the comm center. The quiet force that kept everything running. I saw the change in Robert, of course. The young man with ink on his fingers became a man in a tailored suit, with a briefcase and a serious demeanor. The dreams of building things became the reality of budgets and boardrooms. He was successful. I was proud of him. But sometimes, in the quiet of the evening after he'd fallen asleep, I'd miss the sound of him explaining a complex idea with such passion, his hands moving in the air. Now, our conversations were about schedules. Did we need more milk? Was the tax form signed? And David, my beautiful boy. He grew up in the world Robert built. A world of good schools, summer camps, the latest gadgets. He admired his father, wanted to be like him. A go-getter. A winner. And I was just mom. The one who was always there. The constant. Like the kitchen stove or the comfortable armchair. You don't really see the chair, do you? You just know it's there to hold you. When David brought Sarah home, I was so happy for him. She was brilliant, ambitious, beautiful. A lawyer. She had a laugh like wind chimes and opinions on everything. I thought we would be close. I dreamed of having a daughter, finally. Someone to talk to. But Sarah saw the world in a very clear, modern way. She saw my life, a life of homemade jam and volunteering at the library, a life without a career, as something sweet but outdated. A relic. They got married in a spectacular wedding. I wore a pale lavender dress. Robert gave a speech. That made everyone laugh and clap. I just watched my son's face, so full of love, and my heart was a balloon, too full of joy to speak. They moved into a modern, minimalist house. Everything was white and gray and sleek. It was beautiful, but it never felt warm to me. It felt like a museum or a very nice hotel. Our old house, with its comfortable clutter and faded sofa, was the opposite. But that was the past, I supposed. This was their future. And Robert and we settled into a rhythm. A comfortable, quiet rhythm. We had our routines. Morning coffee. The evening news. We talked about the garden, about our friends' grandchildren, about the price of things. The deep, winding conversations of our youth had dried up, replaced by a calm, shallow stream. I told myself this was peace. This was what a long marriage looked like. You didn't need to talk all the time. You just needed to be there. I was so busy being there, I didn't notice I was slowly fading away. The first crack was so small, I almost didn't hear it. It was a Sunday dinner. Robert, David, Sarah, and me around my dining table. I'd spent all day cooking. Pot roast, the way Robert loved it. David's favorite scalloped potatoes. A chocolate pie. We were eating, and David was talking about a big deal his father had just closed. You're a legend at the firm, Dad, David said, his voice full of pride. Robert waved a hand, but he was smiling. Well, it took decades to build that reputation. Sarah nodded, sipping her wine. It's so important to have a legacy, to build something that lasts. She turned her bright smile to me. Don't you think, Eleanor? Oh, yes, I said, passing the bread basket. Family is the most important legacy. There was a tiny pause. Sarah's smile didn't change, but it didn't reach her eyes either. Of course, she said. But I meant a professional legacy. Something tangible. Something that changes the industry. She looked back at Robert with admiration. That's real influence. I felt a little prick, like a needle. I looked down at my hands, at the faint scars from old oven burns, from gardening cuts. Were they not tangible? Was the love I put into this meal, into this family, not a real thing? I said nothing. I just picked up my fork. The little pricks became more frequent. A comment here. A look there. I'd offer to help Sarah in her kitchen, and she'd gently guide me away from the fancy coffee machine. It's a bit complicated, Eleanor. Let me do it. As if I couldn't learn. I'd mention a book I'd enjoyed at the library, and Sarah would recommend a podcast series on the same topic, something more dynamic and current. David started to echo her, just a little. Mom, you should get a smartphone. Then we could video call. He said it kindly, but it felt like I was being left on the shore while their boat sailed toward a brighter, faster future. And Robert didn't seem to notice any of it. He was pleased with David's success, impressed by Sarah's sharp mind. When I tried to talk to him about it one night, brushing my hair at my vanity, I kept my voice light. Sarah is very sure of herself, isn't she? Robert, already in bed reading a report, nodded without looking up. She's a powerhouse. Good for David. Keeps him on his toes. I just sometimes feel, I searched for the word, a little slow around her. That made him look up. He gave me a kind, absent smile. Don't be silly, Ellie. You're the heart of this family. No one thinks you're slow. He said the right words, but he said them like he was reciting a fact from one of his reports. Then he went back to his reading. The conversation was over. The party for Robert's Lifetime Achievement Award was Sarah's idea. She insisted on hosting it. Our house is perfect for it, she said. It's a statement. It reflects the stature of the award. Robert was touched. I was, too, at first. Our son and his wife, wanting to honor him. It felt right. Then the planning began. Sarah took charge. It was to be catered. A professional bartender. A specific color scheme. One afternoon, she came over with fabric swatches. I'm thinking a navy and silver theme. Very elegant. Very distinguished. She laid the swatches on my coffee table. What do you think, Eleanor? It sounds beautiful, I said. Good. Now for your dress. She looked at me, her head tilted. We should get you something that fits the theme. Something appropriate. I know a wonderful personal shopper at Nordstrom. I'll set up an appointment. A cold little knot formed in my stomach. Oh, that's not necessary, Sarah. I have a lovely dress. The blue one I wore to the charity gala last year. Sarah's smile was patient. That's a very nice dress, Eleanor. But this is a different caliber of event. Robert's colleagues, the senior partners, the press, they'll all be there. We want you to look, she paused. We want you to feel your best. We want you to look the part, is what I heard. We don't want you to embarrass anyone. I looked at Robert, who was nodding along. Sarah has a good eye, Ellie. Let her treat you. So I went. The personal shopper was a young woman with a headset and a measuring tape. She brought me dresses that felt stiff and strange. Sarah approved a navy sheath dress. It was simple, expensive, and it felt like a costume on me. I looked in the mirror and saw a politely dressed stranger. Perfect, Sarah said, clasping her hands. Now you'll blend right in. The word blend echoed in my head. I didn't want to blend. I was the wife of the honoree. But I just nodded and said thank you. The day of the party arrived. Our house was quiet. Robert was pacing, practicing his speech. I put on the navy dress. I looked at myself in my own familiar mirror. I tried to see the woman Robert married, the mother David knew. But all I saw was an older woman in a proper dress, her hands clasped nervously. Robert came in, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me. You look very nice, Ellie. It was the same tone he used to compliment a well-set table. A generic appreciation. Thank you, I said softly. He didn't come over to touch my shoulder or take my hand. He was already mentally at the party, at the podium. I was part of the scenery he was about to walk through. We drove to David and Sarah's in silence. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a thick silence, full of everything we weren't saying. Their house was transformed. It glowed. Silver balloons floated. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters in white shirts moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicate canapes. It was like a scene from a movie. Robert was swallowed by the crowd immediately. Handshakes, backslaps, laughter. He was in his element. He looked taller, more vibrant. This was his world. I stood just inside the doorway, holding my simple clutch purse. I felt like I had walked onto the wrong stage. David spotted me and came over, giving me a quick, one-armed hug. Hey, Mom. You look great. Wow, what a turnout, huh? He was beaming, his eyes scanning the room for his wife, his father, the important guests. It's wonderful, I said. Sarah's in her glory, he laughed, and then he was pulled away by a colleague. I tried to find a place to be. I wasn't a guest who could just mingle. I was the wife. But no one seemed to know what to do with me. Robert's younger colleagues would approach, ask if I was enjoying the party, and then, when I said I was Robert's wife, their eyes would flicker with a polite but disinterested recognition before they excused themselves. I found a quiet corner near a large potted plant. From there I watched. I watched Robert command the room. I watched Sarah, the perfect hostess, glowing as she directed staff and charmed executives. I watched my son, so proud, so seamlessly a part of this glittering world. And I realized with a sudden, hollow ache that I had no place here. I had helped build the man they were celebrating, but I was not part of this monument. I was the scaffolding, necessary for the construction, but removed once the beautiful building was complete. The feeling of invisibility settled over me like a fine dust. It was in the way people's eyes slid past me. It was in the way the waiter offered me a drink without really seeing my face. It was in the way my own husband's gaze swept over the crowd but never landed on me, seeking reassurance, sharing the moment. Halfway through the evening, I needed air. The noise, the laughter, it was all pressing in on me. I moved toward the glass doors leading to the patio. As I passed the grand staircase, I saw Sarah talking in a low, urgent voice to one of the caterers. She finished and turned, almost bumping into me.
Oh,
Eleanor. Her eyes swept over me, from my head to my shoes. They paused for a fraction of a second on my wrist, on my watch. It was a simple watch, a Timex with a leather strap. Robert had given it to me for our 10th anniversary. It wasn't expensive, even then, but it was reliable. It had seen me through decades of school runs, doctor's appointments, waiting for Robert to come home. The crystal was a little scratched. Sarah's smile was tight. Everything okay? You're not hiding, are you? She said it like a joke, but it wasn't. Just getting a little air, I said. Of course. It's quite a crowd. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a confidential murmur. The smell of her perfume was overwhelming. Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me saying, but your watch. It's a little, well, it's very you. But with the dress, and for the photos later, she let the sentence hang. I instinctively covered the watch with my other hand. The old leather felt warm against my skin. Maybe, Sarah continued, her voice sweet as syrup, you could just slip it into your purse for the rest of the evening? We want everything to be perfect for Dad.
we, Dad.
Not your husband. Not Robert. She was already repositioning him in the family narrative. He was Dad, the patriarch, the icon. And I was an accessory that didn't quite match. I didn't argue. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I fumbled with the clasp, my old fingers clumsy. I dropped the watch into my little purse. My wrist felt naked and cold. I never made it to the patio. I just stood there, by the staircase, lost in a sea of my own irrelevance. That's when Robert began his speech. Someone tapped a glass. The room quieted. Robert stood at a small podium, a spotlight making his silver hair shine. He looked distinguished. Important. He started by thanking the company. He thanked his mentors. He thanked his team. He told a funny story about his early days. The crowd chuckled on cue. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drum. Thank you, I whispered in my mind. Look at me. Just say thank you to me. He spoke for 10 minutes. He talked about late nights, tough decisions, the thrill of the work. He was eloquent. He was moving. And then he came to the end. Finally, he said, his voice growing softer, more sincere. I have to thank my family, my rock, my son, David, who inspires me every day to build a better future. He smiled at David, who swelled with pride. And my brilliant daughter-in-law, Sarah, whose support for David and for our whole family knows no bounds. This night wouldn't be the same without your incredible effort, Sarah. The crowd applauded. Sarah gave a modest, beautiful little wave. Robert paused. He looked out. He took a breath. And of course, he said. My breath caught. Here it was. And of course, he repeated, to all of you, for being here to celebrate this moment. Thank you. The applause erupted. People surged forward to congratulate him. He had thanked the room. He had thanked the crowd. But he had not said my name. The air left my lungs in a slow, silent sigh. It wasn't an oversight. It was an absence. A void where I was supposed to be. In that moment, the last thread holding me to that room, to that version of my life, snapped. That's when Sarah appeared at my elbow again. The party was reaching its peak. Robert was holding court, surrounded by a ring of people. I was still standing by the stairs, a statue of a woman in a navy dress. Eleanor. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were busy, scanning the room. You've been standing here for a while. You look a little pale. Are you feeling tired? I looked at her. I said nothing. She mistook my silence for agreement. She placed a light, cool hand on my arm. It was not a comforting touch. It was a guiding touch. A steering touch. You know, she said, leaning close so only I could hear, her words perfectly polite and utterly devastating. No one would mind if you wanted to slip away for a bit. Go upstairs to the guest room.
Lie down.
You must be exhausted. It's been a long night for you. We can handle everything down here.
We.
Slip away. No one would mind. In her eyes, I saw the final, clear truth. I was not a participant. I was a potential problem. A piece of the scenery that might wilt under the bright lights. My presence was a mild concern. My absence would be a relief. And so I smiled. It was the only defense I had left. A smile to cover the collapse happening inside me. A smile to agree with her, to say, you are right. I am tired. I am out of place. I nodded. I turned. And I walked up the staircase, away from my husband's triumph, away from the family I had built my life upon. Each step was a farewell. To the laughter below. To the man who forgot to say my name. To the son who didn't see me leave. To the woman I thought I was. The guest room was beautiful. Immaculate. It smelled of linen spray and emptiness. I didn't lie down. I sat in a chair by the window, looking out at the dark shapes of trees in the backyard. I didn't cry.
I was past crying.
I felt very calm and very old. The noise from the party was a distant murmur, a world away. Up here, in the silence, I could finally hear myself think. I thought about the young woman who typed letters to pay for her husband's dreams. I thought about the mother who sang lullabies and kissed bruises. I thought about the wife who learned to love the quiet, who made a home out of love and necessity. Where had she gone? She hadn't gone anywhere. She was right here. But she had been neatly, gently erased. Not by malice, but by progress. By a new world that valued sharpness over softness, ambition over constancy, legacy over love. I was a handwritten letter in a world of emails. Cherished, perhaps, in theory, but no longer functional. I sat there for a long time. Hours. The noise downstairs gradually faded. I heard the goodbyes, the laughter at the door, the crunch of cars on the driveway. Finally, the house fell into a deep, exhausted silence. I heard footsteps on the stairs. A light tap on the door. It was Robert. He came in, still in his suit jacket, his tie loosened. He looked tired, but glowing with the aftermath of success. There you are, he said. Sarah said you weren't feeling well. A headache? I looked at him. My husband of 45 years. The father of my child. A stranger in a beautiful room. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Not a headache. He came over, patted my shoulder. Well, it was a long night. A wonderful night, though, wasn't it? Did you hear the speech? I heard it, I said. I think it went over well. He sat on the edge of the bed, facing me. He was still buzzing, wanting to relive his triumph. Old Johnson said it was the best speech he's heard in years. And Sarah, she outdid herself. This house was the perfect venue. Yes, I whispered. She did a wonderful job. He finally seemed to really look at me. You're very quiet, Ellie. Are you sure you're all right? The question, coming now, was like a stone dropped into a still pond.
It was.
Too late. Robert, I said. You didn't say my name. He blinked. What? In your speech. You thanked everyone. You thanked David. You thanked Sarah. You didn't say my name. A flicker of confusion, then annoyance, passed over his face. It was quickly replaced by a placating expression.
Oh, Ellie.
For heaven's sake. You know I'm grateful to you. You're my wife. That goes without saying. And there it was. The core of it all. It goes without saying. My whole life. My love, my work, my presence, that all went without saying. It was the silent, assumed foundation. And what happens to a foundation when you build a grand new structure on top of it without ever checking to see if it's still solid? It crumbles. Quietly and out of sight. Does it? I asked, my voice still calm. Does it go without saying? He was getting frustrated now. It was spoiling his perfect evening. This is silly. You're being overly sensitive. It was a busy night. I had a lot of people to thank. You know what you mean to me. But I didn't know. Not anymore. And his frustration told me everything. My feeling invisible was an inconvenience. A silly problem. I think I'd like to go home, I said, standing up. Now? It's late. We're staying here tonight. Sarah made up the room. I want to go home, I repeated, with a firmness that surprised even me. It wasn't a request. Robert sighed, a long-suffering sound.
Fine.
If you're going to be this way, I'll get the keys. The drive home was silent. The kind of silence that fills the car like a heavy fog. He turned on the radio to fill it. A talk show about investments. We walked into our house. It smelled of the lemon polish I'd used the day before. Of home. But it didn't feel the same. I felt like a visitor. Robert went straight to bed, muttering about being exhausted. I went to the kitchen.
I made a
cup of tea the old-fashioned way, with a kettle on the stove. I sat at our kitchen table, the one we'd bought 30 years ago to replace the wobbly thrift store one. I ran my hand over a small nick in the wood, made by a toy truck when David was little. I sat there until the sky began to lighten from black to deep blue. I did not make a grand decision. I did not pack a bag. I did not write an angry letter. The change that happened in me was not dramatic. It was geological. A slow, seismic shift deep in my soul. When Robert came down for breakfast, I was still there, my cold tea in front of me. Did you sleep at all? He asked, heading for the coffee maker.
No.
He poured his coffee. He stood by the counter, looking at me. The annoyance from the night before was gone, replaced by a faint puzzlement. Are you still upset about the speech? I looked at him. I'm not upset, Robert.
I'm aware.
Aware of what? I'm aware that I've become a habit. A comfortable piece of furniture. I'm aware that my entire life's work, raising our son, building this home, supporting you, has become something that goes without saying. And when something goes without saying for long enough, people forget it was ever said at all. He put his cup down. That's not fair. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you really saw me? Not as your wife, or David's mother, but as Eleanor. When was the last time you asked me what I thought about something that mattered? Or told me about your day? Not just your schedule? When was the last time my presence was necessary, and not just expected? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. Because there was none. The days that followed were quiet, but the quiet was different. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of a cold, clear dawn after a storm has passed. The landscape is the same, but everything has been washed clean, exposed. I stopped trying so hard. I didn't make his favorite meals unless I felt like it. I didn't ask about his day, if he didn't offer. I started going to the library on days I hadn't planned. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. A tiny, silly thing. Something just for me. Robert noticed. He'd come home, and the house would be still. What's for dinner? He'd ask. I'm not sure, I'd say. I was at my painting class. He'd look at me confused. This was not our script. David called. Hey, Mom. Everything okay? Dad said you've been quiet.
I'm fine, David.
Just doing some things for myself. A pause on the line.
Oh.
Okay. That's good. He sounded unsure. One afternoon, Sarah came over. She brought a trendy juice cleanse kit. I thought you might like to try this, Eleanor. It's fantastic for energy. I thanked her and set it aside. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't ask about her latest case. We sat in the living room, and for the first time, I didn't try to fill the silence. I let it sit between us. Finally, she spoke. Is everything all right with you and Dad? Why wouldn't it be? I asked. You seem different. I am different, I said simply. I'm remembering who I am, outside of being your father's wife, or your mother-in-law. She looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw something in her eyes beyond polite concern. I saw a flicker of understanding, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of fear. She had built her identity on being modern, capable, indispensable. What would happen to her if, one day, that was also deemed outdated? She left soon after. The juice kit remained on the table, a brightly colored monument to a misunderstanding. The change was slow. It wasn't about punishment. It was about presence. My presence. I began to exist for myself again. I had opinions. I said no sometimes. I spent a weekend with an old friend from my secretarial days, laughing about stories Robert had never heard. One evening, about a month after the party, Robert found me in the garden. I was pulling weeds, my hands dirty, the old watch, my watch, back on my wrist. He stood watching me for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't stop what I was doing." "For what?" "For not saying your name." It was a start. Just a tiny, fragile start. I didn't leave Robert. That wasn't the point. The point wasn't to run away from my life, but to finally step back into it. To reclaim the space I had willingly, lovingly, given away piece by piece over 45 years. The party wasn't the cause of my invisibility. It was just the spotlight that finally revealed it. It showed me the empty space where I was supposed to be standing. My story doesn't have a dramatic ending. There was no big confrontation, no tearful reconciliation scene. Real life is quieter than that. It happens in small moments. It happens when Robert, one evening, turns off the TV and says, "Tell me about your painting class." And he actually listens. It happens when David calls and, instead of just talking about his work, he asks, "What did you paint this week, Mom?" It happens when I say, "I don't want to go to that restaurant," and Robert says, "Okay, where would you like to go?" And it's not a concession, it's a question. The love is still there. It was always there. But it had gone to sleep under a blanket of habit and assumption. We are slowly, carefully, waking it up. It's older now. It has wrinkles and scars. It's not the fiery, dream-filled love of our youth. It's something softer, more deliberate. It has to be chosen now, every day, not just assumed. And me? I am learning. I am Eleanor. I am a woman who likes quiet mornings and the feel of soil in her hands. I am a beginner painter of very mediocre watercolors. I am a wife and a mother, but I am no longer only those things. I am a person who exists even when I am not being useful to someone else. To any woman listening, any person who has ever felt themselves fading into the background of their own story, you are not invisible. You are just